sort of put into the adversary camp, China, Iran, others. But Mr. Abramowitz mentioned in particular nations like India, with which we have a strong relationship, or Saudi Arabia, one a democracy, one a monarchy. And I want to just focus on how do we deal with this when it is a nation that we're in partnership with. And I want to use India as an example. I'd like to introduce into the record an article from the Wall Street Journal, December 2, foiled plot to kill U.S. Sikh is linked to murder of a Canadian activist.
Without objection, be clear.
And I want to read the first two paragraphs of the letter. I think members of the panel understand this, but I just want to make sure the public does. Hours after a Sikh community leader was assassinated by two masked men in the parking lot of his temple in Canada, a senior Indian security officer sent a drug trafficker he knew a video of the blood-covered victim slumped over in his truck. An hour later, he followed that up with the New York address of another Sikh activist he wanted killed. The trafficker got right on it, according to U.S. prosecutors. He passed on the video and other messages to a purported hitman who had already accepted a $15,000 advance payment for the contract killing on U.S. soil and suggested there could be more such work. Quote, "We have so many targets," he told the hired gun, who he didn't know was really an undercover U.S. law enforcement officer. That's the case that has been recently brought in federal court in New York, connecting to the murder of the Sikh activist in the suburb of Toronto. And it is highly, highly disturbing, to say the least. And that quote, "we have so many targets," is something we need to pay very serious attention to. It's interesting to note that the Indian government's reaction to the prosecution in the United States has been somewhat different than to the claim that their intelligence officials, at least one official, was implicated in the murder in Toronto. When the Canadian government, Prime Minister Trudeau, raised the issue and laid out the evidentiary case, the Indian government responded in a very negative way and asked Ottawa to recall about 40 Canadian diplomats that were in India. When the news of this prosecution in the United States came out, the Indian government at least suggested they were somewhat concerned and potentially chastened by this story, and their comments have been a little bit more reasonable. But we often say we're the oldest democracy in the world and India is the largest democracy in the world. This is not the behavior of a respectable democracy. And I would like you to just use this as use the Indian example when we're dealing with a nation that we have such strong connections to. We have military connections, economic connections, connections of family. Our Indian American diaspora community in the United States is such an important part of who we are as a country. What are the strategies you suggest that we use in dealing with nations that we traditionally count as friends? Microphone.
Sorry, can you do that better? Sorry about that. You know, what I can say on this, I honestly don't know more about these cases than is in the public record so far. This is all coming to light. It strikes me that one thing that's very important is to get more information about India's activities in democracies out there in the open. That strikes me as something that this body could obtain from sources within the U.S. government, I think, and to publicize as much as you can, so be transparent about what's going on. I would say the only other thing that I would add is that if you look at Freedom in the World, which is our canonical annual survey of political rights and civil liberties in the world, you see two broad trends. One is authoritarian countries kind of getting stronger, but you also see backsliding among established democracies. And clearly India is one of the cases that have been where there's been this kind of backsliding. So the kind of overseas activities that you are alluding to is also part of a backsliding, a democratic backsliding.
Thank you. And just one last comment. I want to thank Ms. Gallagher for being here representing my profession, the legal profession. The targeting of lawyers who represent political dissidents, human rights activists, is a long-time strategy. There's a case decided by the U.S.